There is a shadow fact that the Canadian government and major banks are desperate to keep from you. While they brag about our national GDP growth, the reality on the ground in cities from Halifax to Victoria is that our GDP per capita, the actual wealth of the individual, is in a free fall. You feel it every morning when you check your bank balance. You've done everything right. You went to school, you got the job, you put in the 40-hour weeks, and yet you are further from homeownership or retirement than your parents were at half your age. The middle class isn't just shrinking, it's being systematically dismantled. We are living through a silent devaluation of the Canadian life. The visceral pain of looking at a $150 grocery bill that barely fills 2 bags isn't an accident. It's the result of a coordinated economic shift that favors the few at the top while leaving the rest of us to fight for scraps. But why now? Why does it feel like the floor is falling out from under us in real time? The answer lies in a web of monopolies and policy failures that go much deeper than a simple supply chain issue. This is the story of how the Great White North became the land of the Great Debt Trap.
Let's talk about the grocery cartel that holds every Canadian dinner table hostage. When you walk into a Loblaws, a Sobeys, or a Metro, you aren't just shopping, you're entering a controlled ecosystem. Have you noticed how the prices of staples, butter, bread, milk, seem to rise in perfect synchronization across every competing brand? This isn't just inflation, it's a masterclass in corporate greed, protected by a lack of competition. The average Canadian family is now spending thousands more per year on food than they did just 3 years ago, while these giants report record-breaking profits. They blame the carbon tax, they blame the farmers, and they blame global shipping. But when the dust settles, the money is flowing into the pockets of the billionaire class, while you're forced to decide between buying fresh produce or paying your heating bill. It's a visceral, stinging reality that makes your stomach turn every time you hear the beep of the self-checkout. You aren't just paying for food, you're paying for their dividends. But there is an even darker reason why these prices will never go back down, and it has nothing to do with the items on the shelf.
The Canadian housing market is no longer a place to live. It has become the world's most dangerous Ponzi scheme. Whether you are in the GTA, the GVA, or even once affordable places like London, Ontario, the barrier to entry has become an impenetrable wall. We are witnessing the death of the starter home. In Canada, we have reached a point where the average household income can no longer qualify for the average home mortgage. This has created a permanent class of renters who are effectively paying off someone else's equity while their own dreams of stability vanish. The pain is visceral when you realize that your $3,000 a month basement apartment in Brampton is costing you more than a mansion would have cost a decade ago. The Bank of Canada's interest rate hikes were supposed to cool this fever, but instead they've just squeezed the life out of existing homeowners who are now facing mortgage cliff renewals. People are losing their homes not because they failed, but because the math no longer works. But who is actually buying these houses? The answer is a shadowy group of investors that you are unknowingly competing against every time you put in an offer.
The Bank of Canada is playing a high-stakes game of poker with your life. For years, they kept interest rates at near zero, fueling a debt-driven frenzy that encouraged every Canadian to borrow beyond their means. Now, the bill has come due. By hiking rates to combat the very inflation they helped create, they have effectively trapped the middle class. If you have a variable rate mortgage, you've watched your monthly payments double, leaving you with nothing for savings, travel, or your kids' education. It's a suffocating ceiling, like the walls are closing in. You work harder, but the interest eats your raises. You save more, but the inflation eats your purchasing power. This is the interest rate trap. The BOC claims they are trying to soften the economy, but for the average worker in Calgary or Montreal, this isn't a soft landing, it's a crash. They are trying to fix a fire with a flood, and you are the one drowning. But there is a hidden tax that they never mention in their press releases, one that is slowly draining your TFSA and RRSP without you ever seeing a single deduction.
Inflation is the invisible thief, a hidden tax that the CRA doesn't have to legislate because it happens automatically. When the government prints money to fund deficits, the value of every dollar in your pocket shrinks. Think about it. If you have $10,000 in a savings account today, that money buys significantly less than it did 5 years ago. You didn't lose any dollars, but you lost the time it took to earn them. This is the ultimate betrayal of the working class. You are running on a treadmill that is accelerating every month. This is why a good salary of $100,000 now feels like $60,000 did in 2015. The emotional toll of this silent tax is immense. It creates a constant state of low-level anxiety. You feel like you're failing even when you're succeeding. You see the price of a Tim Hortons coffee creep up, the price of a Netflix sub rise, and the cost of gas fluctuate wildly, and you realize that your hard-earned Canadian dollars are being debased. But why is Canada's inflation feeling so much more sticky than in other G7 nations? The secret lies in our broken supply chains and a specific tax that hits every single stage of production.
Let's talk about the CRA tax bite. Canada has some of the highest personal income tax rates in the world, but are we getting the value for it? We pay into a healthcare system that is currently on life support, with wait times for specialists stretching into years. We pay into infrastructure that is crumbling, while we sit in some of the worst traffic in North America. The real pain comes during tax season, when you realize that after federal tax, provincial tax, CPP, and EI, nearly 40% of your labor is gone before you even see it. And then, you take what's left and pay 13% or 15% in sales tax on almost everything you buy. It's a double, triple, and quadruple dip into your wallet. The middle-class worker is the primary funder of the Canadian state, yet they are the ones receiving the least amount of support. You're too rich for government rebates, but too poor to actually afford a comfortable life. This tax bracket creep is a silent killer of wealth. As your nominal wages go up with inflation, you get pushed into higher tax brackets, meaning the government actually takes a larger percentage of your lower purchasing power. It's a rigged game, designed to keep you exactly where you are.
The supply chain has become the favorite scapegoat for every CEO in Canada, but it's often a convenient lie to mask price gouging. While global shipping costs have largely returned to pre-pandemic levels, the prices on our shelves have remained at their crisis peaks. This is known as price stickiness. Once a corporation knows you are willing, or forced, to pay $8 for a head of lettuce, they have zero incentive to ever lower it back to $3. Canada's unique geography makes this worse. Because we are a massive country with a small population concentrated in a few hubs, we are at the mercy of a few transportation and distribution giants. If one link in the chain decides to hike prices, the entire country feels the sting. The visceral frustration of seeing out-of-stock signs while prices continue to climb creates a sense of scarcity that drives panic buying and further inflation. We are being conditioned to accept a lower standard of living under the guise of global instability. But there's another factor, the carbon tax. Regardless of your political stance, the math is simple. When you tax the fuel that moves the food, the price of the food must go up. And in a country as vast as Canada, everything moves by fuel.
Energy costs in Canada are a paradox. We are one of the most resource-rich nations on Earth, sitting on vast reserves of oil and gas. Yet our heating and electricity bills are reaching record highs. For a Canadian family in the middle of a negative 30-degree winter, heating isn't a luxury, it's a survival requirement. The emotional stress of opening a $500 Enbridge or hydro bill in January is a uniquely Canadian pain. Between the carbon tax, the clean fuel regulations, and the aging power grids, the cost of heat is becoming a primary driver of poverty. We are being told to transition to green energy, which is a noble goal, but the transition is being funded on the backs of people who can barely afford their current rent. There is a visceral disconnect between the policymakers in Ottawa and the person in a rural town who has to choose between filling their truck to get to work or keeping their home warm. This energy poverty is the newest addition to the Canadian experience, and it's a symptom of a government that has prioritized optics over the immediate economic survival of its citizens. But wait until you see how this interacts with our current immigration targets.
Canada's immigration policy has become a lightning rod for economic frustration, and for a good reason. The math simply does not add up. Bringing in over 1 million people a year into a country that is only building a fraction of the necessary housing is a recipe for a humanitarian and economic disaster. It's not about the people coming in, it's about the infrastructure that isn't there to support them. This massive influx creates an artificial floor for housing prices and a ceiling for wages. When you have a massive pool of new labor, corporations have no reason to compete for workers by raising pay. Meanwhile, the surge in demand for rentals in the GTA and GVA has sent basement apartment prices into the stratosphere. It's a visceral struggle for both newcomers and multi-generational Canadians who are now competing for the same crumbling infrastructure. Our hospitals are overflowing, our transit is packed, and our schools are at capacity. This isn't a growing pain, it's a structural failure. The government uses these numbers to keep the headline GDP looking positive, but for you, the individual, it means more competition for less resources. The dream of a spacious backyard and a quiet neighborhood is being traded for a densified, expensive reality that no one voted for.
Canada is not a free market. It is a collection of protected monopolies. Think about your cell phone bill. We pay some of the highest rates in the developed world to a handful of giants, Rogers, Bell, and TELUS. Think about your internet, your banking, and even your air travel. When you fly from Toronto to Vancouver, it often costs more than flying from Toronto to Europe. Why? Because the big three or big five in every sector have successfully lobbied for a regulatory environment that kills any potential competitor before they can even start. This oligopoly economy is the reason why your costs never go down. In a real market, a competitor would see high grocery prices and open a cheaper store. In Canada, the barriers to entry are so high that no one dares. The visceral feeling of being trapped with no better options is everywhere. Whether it's the banking fees you pay to the Big Five or the astronomical roaming charges on your phone, you are being harvested for profit. These corporations aren't just part of the economy, they are the economy, and their interests are rarely aligned with yours. This lack of competition is the secret engine of Canadian inflation, and it's why the cost of being Canadian is a luxury tax in itself.
Household debt in Canada has reached a level that is frankly terrifying. We are now the most indebted nation in the G7. For every dollar of disposable income, the average Canadian owes roughly $1.80. This isn't just good debt like a reasonable mortgage. It's high-interest credit cards, car loans for vehicles we can't afford, and lines of credit used just to bridge the gap between paychecks. The emotional weight of this debt is a silent epidemic. It causes broken marriages, health problems, and a permanent state of fear. People are one missed paycheck away from total ruin. This is the debt trap that keeps the Canadian economy spinning. If everyone stopped borrowing, the economy would collapse. So the system is designed to keep you in a cycle of minimum payments. You feel the visceral sting of the 21% interest rate on your credit card, while your savings account pays you a measly 1%. The banks are winning on both ends. This mountain of debt is a ticking time bomb, and as interest rates stay higher for longer, the fuse is getting shorter. What happens when the average Canadian can no longer even afford the interest, let alone the principal? We are about to find out.
The loonie is shrinking, not just in value, but in its power on the world stage. As our productivity lags behind the US and our economy becomes more dependent on real estate than innovation, the Canadian dollar is losing its edge. This might sound like macroeconomics, but the pain is local. When the loonie drops, everything we import, which is almost everything we buy, gets more expensive. Your iPhone, your car, your winter boots, and your out-of-season vegetables are all priced in a way that reflects our weakening currency. It's a visceral realization. You are working the same hours, but your labor is worth less to the rest of the world. This is the purchasing power drain. We are becoming a branch plant economy, where we sell our resources and buy back finished goods at a premium. The government talks about stability, but for the person trying to save for a trip or a major purchase, there is no stability, only a slow, grinding decline. The dream of the Canadian dollar being at par with the US dollar feels like a distant memory from a different era. Today, we are just trying to keep our heads above water, while the global economy moves on without us. But there is a mistake millions of Canadians are making with their TFSAs that is making this even worse. The TFSA and RRSP are marketed as the ultimate tools for Canadian wealth, but for many, they have become an illusion of safety. Millions of Canadians have their TFSA money sitting in high-interest savings accounts, earning 2%, while inflation is at 4 or 5%. In real terms, they are losing money every single year. They feel safe because the balance isn't going down, but the value of that balance is evaporating. This is the savings trap. Furthermore, the RRSP is often a tax bomb waiting to go off. People contribute to get a refund today, but they don't realize that when they withdraw that money in retirement, the government will be there to take a massive cut, and who knows how high tax rates will be in 30 years. The visceral fear of outliving your money is real, yet the tools we are given are designed for a world that no longer exists.
We are told to invest in Canada, but our stock market is dominated by the same banks and oil companies that are squeezing us. To truly protect yourself, you have to look outside the traditional Canadian financial advice. You have to realize that the safe path is now the riskiest one of all. But why is our productivity so low? Why can't we just work our way out of this? The retail apocalypse has hit Canada differently. While the US has a diverse range of mid-tier options, Canada's landscape has been hollowed out. It's either the ultra-expensive boutiques or the giant big-box retailers like Walmart and Amazon. The small, local business, the backbone of the Canadian middle class, is dying. High commercial rents, rising labor costs, and the Amazonification of shopping have made it nearly impossible for a local shop to survive in a place like downtown Calgary or Vancouver. When a local business dies, the wealth leaves the community and goes to a corporate headquarters in another country. This creates a visceral sense of loss in our neighborhoods. We see for lease signs everywhere, and the unique character of our cities is replaced by the same 5 fast food chains and drugstores. This isn't just about shopping, it's about the loss of the entrepreneurial ladder. It's becoming harder to start a business and easier to just become a cog in a corporate machine. The path to prosperity is being gated by those who already own the land and the platforms. And the gap between the haves and the have-nots is widening into a canyon that might be impossible to bridge. Canada has a productivity problem that is rarely discussed in polite company. We are simply not producing enough value per hour worked compared to our peers. Why? When they can just buy 5 condos in Toronto and watch the value go up 10% a year for doing nothing. This is the real estate black hole. It sucks the productive energy out of our economy. This is why our healthcare system is failing and our wages are flat. We aren't getting more efficient, we are just getting more expensive. The visceral frustration of being a young, talented Canadian and realizing you have to move to the US to get paid what you're worth is a national tragedy. We are experiencing a brain drain of our best and brightest because the Canadian economy is rigged to reward those who own land, not those who create value. This productivity gap is the reason why our standard of living is falling behind. We are living off the fumes of our natural resources and a housing bubble that is eventually going to run out of air. What we are witnessing in Canada is nothing short of intergenerational theft. The older generation, the boomers, are sitting on trillions of dollars in real estate equity, while the younger generations, Gen Z and millennials, are being tasked with paying for the healthcare and pensions of the very people who priced them out of the market. This creates a visceral tension at the family dinner table. Young Canadians are delaying marriage, delaying having children, and living with roommates into their 30s because the basic life is now a luxury. The social contract has been broken. The promise was, work hard and you will have a better life than your parents. For the first time in Canadian history, that promise is a lie. The emotional pain of feeling like a failure because you can't afford a home despite having a master's degree is a weight that an entire generation is carrying. We are creating a 2-tier Canada, those who inherited property and those who will work forever to pay rent to them. This divide is the most dangerous threat to our social fabric, and it's being fueled by every policy decision coming out of Ottawa and the provincial capitals. Have you noticed that basic goods are now being treated like luxury items? In a Canadian grocery store, items like high-quality olive oil, good cuts of meat, and even certain types of cheese are now frequently found behind anti-theft plexiglass or tagged with security sensors. This is a visceral sign of a society in decline. When the basics of a healthy diet become high-theft items, the middle class is in deep trouble. We are being nudged toward highly processed, low-quality foods because that's all the average person can afford. This has long-term implications for our national health and our healthcare spending. The luxury of health is becoming a reality. You see the price of a steak and realize that's 2 hours of labor for a minimum wage worker. You see the price of organic milk and it feels like a splurge. This constant calculation, can I afford this basic ingredient, is a form of psychological warfare. It erodes your sense of dignity. We're a G7 nation, one of the wealthiest on paper, yet our citizens are scanning flyers and chasing loss leaders just to keep their families fed. This isn't the Canada we were promised, and the gap between the official inflation rate and your personal inflation rate is a canyon of lies.
The rental rat race has reached a level of absurdity that would be funny if it weren't so tragic. We are seeing bidding wars for rental units. We are seeing 20 people show up for a viewing of a studio apartment that is actually just a partitioned living room. The visceral indignity of having to provide a credit score, a background check, 3 months of pay stubs, and a personal letter just to be allowed to pay someone 60% of your income for a place to sleep is dehumanizing. In cities like Vancouver and Toronto, the rent-to-income ratio has bypassed the breaking point. This is the rent trap. Once you are in it, it's almost impossible to save for a down payment because the rent increases outpace your ability to save. You are running as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. The fear of an N12 eviction, where a landlord kicks you out to move in just so they can re-rent the place for double the price, is a constant shadow over every tenant's life. This instability is the enemy of community. People don't put down roots when they don't know if they'll be able to afford their neighborhood next year. We are becoming a nation of nomads, moving further and further from our jobs just to find a roof we can afford.
Currency debasement is a term most people ignore until it's too late. When you see the government spending billions on projects that never seem to finish, or sending billions abroad while our own food banks are seeing record usage, you are witnessing the silent devaluation. Every dollar created out of thin air makes your earned dollar worth less. It's a visceral realization. Your savings are being liquidated to pay for government incompetence. We are told that debt doesn't matter because we owe it to ourselves, but the inflation it causes says otherwise. The loonie is being sacrificed on the altar of political expediency. As the world moves towards new financial systems and the dominance of the US dollar is questioned, Canada is in a precarious position. We don't have the industrial base of Germany or the tech sector of the US. We have houses and holes in the ground. If the value of our resources and our real estate drops, what is the loonie actually backed by? This is the question that should keep you up at night. Your financial survival depends on realizing that the official narrative is designed to keep you calm while your purchasing power is harvested. The shadow fact is that the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended for those who own the assets.
The debate between greedflation and costflation is a distraction. The truth is, it's both. Corporations are taking advantage of the inflation narrative to pad their margins, but the government is also making it more expensive to do business. We are caught in a pincer movement. On one side, the Galen Westons of the world are optimizing every cent of profit from your hunger. On the other, the Ottawa bureaucracy is adding layers of costs to everything from carbon to compliance. The visceral reality is that you are the one being squeezed in the middle. We are told to shop around, but when every store is owned by the same 3 companies, where do you go? We are told to get a better job, but when the taxes take the lion's share of your raise, what's the point? This is the Canadian stagnation. We are living in a high-cost, low-growth trap. The emotional toll is a sense of hopelessness. You see the headlines about the strong economy, and you feel like you're the only one struggling. But the shadow fact is that almost everyone is. The middle class is now just a branding term used by politicians to appeal to people who are actually working poor, but don't want to admit it yet.
What they aren't telling you about 2025 is that the lag effect of interest rates hasn't even fully hit yet. A massive wave of Canadian mortgages taken out in the low-rate environment of 2020 and 2021 are set to renew in the next 18 months. For many, their monthly payments will increase by $1,000, $1,500, or even $2,000. This is the mortgage tsunami. When that money is diverted from the economy to the banks, the prices in Canada might finally stop rising, but only because no one has any money left to buy anything. This is the deflationary crash that follows an inflationary spike. The visceral fear of losing your home is about to become a reality for thousands of families. The government will try to step in with relief that will likely just fuel more inflation, continuing the cycle. We are at a crossroads. The shadow fact is that the current Canadian economic model is unsustainable. You cannot have a society where a house earns more than a doctor. You cannot have a society where food is a luxury. Something has to give, and the give is usually the standard of living for the average person. But there is a way to position yourself before the wave hits. You have to stop playing the game by their rules.
So, what is the exit strategy?
To survive the disappearing middle class in Canada, you must become economically bilingual. You need to understand the official economy, but live in the real one. This means diversifying your income outside of the Canadian dollar, investing in assets that can't be printed away, and most importantly, lowering your cost of being Canadian. This might mean moving to a lower-cost province, embracing a more minimalist lifestyle, or finding ways to opt out of the corporate monopolies. The visceral reality is that the Canada of the 1990s is gone, and it's not coming back. We are in a new, harsher era, but knowledge is the ultimate hedge. By understanding why prices are rising, by seeing the strings of the monopolies, the tax traps, and the currency debasement, you can stop being a victim of the system and start being a navigator. The shadow fact is that while the system is designed to keep you down, it's also full of holes. Your mission is to find them. The struggle is real, the pain is visceral, but the story doesn't have to end with you being squeezed out. Stay informed, stay skeptical, and most importantly, stay prepared. The end of the old Canada is just the beginning of your new financial strategy. The question is, are you ready to stop being the harvest?